Thank you everybody for coming to this readout. It's becoming to be like a tradition. Even if we are the 1st of April, there will not be, hopefully, April Fool today. And with that, I would like to give the floor to Adam Peake. He will be the first one to talk today. Thank you very much. Adam, please go ahead.
Thank you, Sebastian. Thank you very much for the introduction. And Adam Peake, Global Stakeholder Engagement, ICANN, and a quick review of what we enjoyed in Seattle. I don't know if there are any slides, as there are some numbers, but I'll start talking. So it's the usual by the numbers presentation, and what we see is reasonably typical. It's the same as we would normally see for a community forum. Over 1,300 people participating in person, and we had 261 from Europe, so about just over 19%. Good numbers, and thank you for being there. And here we see the online participation, and again it's quite similar, from 1,300 down to just over 500, and the same percentage from Europe, which is interesting, I think. So we see 19.9%, so we're being very consistent from the European region. And again, thanks for participation. It's difficult with the time zone. I will now talk about a little bit about what we discussed, and I think the first thing is probably to mention that there was the community forum is always where we talk about the Community Excellence Award, and the recipient this year was Stephen Deheck, who has been involved in the country as a country code manager for many years and a worthy recipient of the award. Quickly about some of the issues, I found it particularly interesting to talk about how we meet, which is a discussion that will continue, and the community is providing important input to that. Reviewing all of these sessions, you can go back to the schedule and you'll see the Zoom recordings and audio recordings and sometimes transcripts. There was an important session about geopolitical updates. There had been the update part had moved to the prep week, so we heard about what was happening then, and then the session in Seattle was more about discussion and opinion, and that was valuable. Something that I enjoyed during the opening session was Kim Davis, the IANA director, talking about time zone management. Those of you who were there over the weekend had experienced the clocks moving forward. And so Kim spoke about time zones, how they were created, and how critical, of course, they are to the global internet. The IANA manages this process. It doesn't set the policies for it, but it manages the process. And Kim's presentation, again, it's on Zoom, and you can find it on the Monday sessions in the welcome ceremony, is well worth a quick review, and so is his blog, which I will put a link to in the chat. So I enjoyed that, and I know many other people came up to me afterwards and said the same. And the last point really is next time we meet, not just how we meet, but the next time we meet, ICANN 83 in Prague, European region, the 9th to the 12th of June. So with that, thank you, and look forward to seeing you in Prague. Cheers. And I think I am over to Martin. Is that correct? Thank you.
That is correct. I'll take the floor. And thank you for that. All the things I don't need to say anymore. Indeed, Seattle was a great place to be, and good to see many of you. And I think overall a fruitful week where we saw people coming together. Taking into account 180 seconds, these were 10 of them. I'll limit myself to three highlights. One was that this was the week that we adopted the strategic plan for the 26 to 30. And please, if you haven't done yet, review it. Many of you have. And I think what you will find is that many of the subjects that we talk about are truly prevalent and truly deserve our attention. So this strategic plan is not, the board confirmed it, but it's really an ICANN strategic plan for all of us to take action as well at the appropriate actions. I think it's set a good direction, and if we fulfill that mission, we'll be seen as still being useful to the world in 2030. The other thing was really thanking UASG and all the work that has been done on IDNs and universal acceptance over the years. 10 years of UASG has now led to a situation where I believe that the world knows about UA. I had the pleasure of being in the Armenian UA Day last Friday, where the whole region came together. And also there, that was clearly felt like we're ready for the next step for making things happen. And we do value very much that is also linking in with us, because it's not only about domain name, of course. It's about facilitating languages on the internet. And I think we do our work there. Also in the strategic plan. Last but not least, many of the discussions we had were also about the holistic review, ITRT, and how to move forward in improving the system and how to deal with the situation where we currently are. I think there's a wide felt need to move in a way that makes sense to all of us. And we've heard different voices about that. And I think this is one of the things you will be seeing to move forward quite soon now, even if much of the resources and much of the attention is focused on the next round of POD. That, I think, that Pari is next.
Thank you very much, Martin. And hello, everyone. Pari Esfandiari from Euralo ELAC speaking for the record. So I believe ICANN 82 marked yet another successful and timely gathering of our global community. As always, it was a privilege to participate in various very interesting discussions that took place. Today, I'm pleased to share highlights from a session I had the opportunity to moderate, the ELAC's plenary titled Core Internet Values Evolution and Challenges for ICANN. This session brought together a distinguished panel of global internet leaders, including Windsurf Tripti, Pritam Marlow from ITU, and Olivier Seprin. The core values underpin the internet success as an open and inclusive space, but today they are under growing pressure from national regulation, commercial consolidation, and emerging technologies. The focus was on what ICANN and the broader multi-stakeholder community must do to preserve them. The conversation emphasized that defending these values requires coordinated action across policy, technical, and civic domains. Windsurf reminded us that the internet was never meant to be a political project, yet it has become deeply entangled in questions of sovereignty and power. Tripti highlighted the importance of protecting the single root and the DNS integrity. Pritam linked our work to broader global framework like the Visas Plus 20 review and the Global Digital Compact. Olivier advocated for monitoring and measuring threats to guide evidence-based policymaking. I also challenged the panel with a key question: can we foster a strategic, value-based collaboration in a time of growing digital fragmentation? This question resonates throughout the discussion, and it's especially relevant for Europe, where regulatory initiatives reflect growing assertion of digital sovereignty. Community voices played an important role in this session. Adel Akplogan emphasized the importance of distinguishing infrastructure from usage in policymaking. David Lawrence stressed the power of individual contribution in upholding collaborative internet engineering. James Garvin warned about growing use of blocking technologies and the rise of walled gardens that change how users experience the internet. Tijani highlighted inclusivity, neutrality, and the risks of digital concentration, and the need of fair participation from underserved regions. Olga Cavalli underscored the need for government involvement and public education, particularly in the global south. Jennifer Chung called for more accessible communication between the technical and policy sphere, while Alejandro Pizzanti reminded us that the defense of core values must guard against well-meaning but harmful intervention. In conclusion, this session was not only timely, it was a necessary reminder that internet governance is no longer just a technical or institutional concern. It's a matter of democratic integrity, public trust, and digital agency as we look forward towards Visas Plus 20 and beyond. I stop here and thank you. I pass it to Jorge, I believe.
Hello, Pari. Hello, everyone. So thanks very much. Yeah, with Nigel. Yeah, I think ICANN 82 marked quite a lot of transitions. One, of course, very important to all our ICANN colleagues is that you have a new boss in town. I don't think he's a sheriff. He's a nice guy, or at least he looks like that. So we don't have to be afraid, like with other sheriffs all around the globe. And I appreciated his listening, his very down to the earth modus. So I hope he keeps on addressing expectations and keeping people equally happy or at least equally unhappy in the community and in his staff, which is, after all, if you are a CEO of such an important organization, you cannot make everybody super happy all the time. The other transition, of course, in the GAC, we saw many new colleagues coming and going. There's a lot of rotation. And one rotation, of course, that didn't affect the people on the ground, but that was hovering all around the place, and especially being in Seattle in the US, was the change of the administration. So we will keep our eyes open on what that means, and also what the new leadership of NTIA, the DOC, and the Department of State brings. We also had a transition in the leadership of the GAC. Nico has now his second term starting, and we have a couple of new people in the GAC leadership, with Tiago from Colombia and Christine from Egypt repeating, and Sheldon, Marco, Hochebonik, and myself joining the circus. And of course, one thing that was very important to us, and we had a cross-community discussion, was the work on the code of conduct, on SOIs. We see that there's progress being made. And if you read the very interesting communique, which is compulsory reading for everyone in the ICANN community, you will see that we ask the board for a speedy resolution of the file with clear and bright line rules for the code of conduct. Let's not overcomplicate things. Regarding the new round of GTLDs, of course, we followed the evolution with a lot of interest from the GAC, especially asking the organization to make sure that the new round really offers a very effective and efficient support program for applicants from underserved regions. So the ASP has to be a success to make new round a success. I think we all agree on that. And of course, on WHOIS and DNS abuse, the other two evergreens in our discussions in the GAC, we saw small but persistent progress in some of the issues. I think GNSO Council is starting to be more proactive on this. I've seen that they are trying to take steps in many of the issues that are of shared interest to us. And also on DNS abuse, especially, we saw some results from the contractual amendments last year, and also, of course, the discussion on the basis of the informal report, which, at least to all the experts who have really read it to the detail, they say it's a very good basis to take steps for further policy discussions. I leave it by that. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jorge. And now we go to Alena. Alena, please take the floor.
Hello, everyone. My apologies for being late. I'll be very short for two reasons. First, as also Adam's numbers showed, the European delegation was not that large this year, so also was RIPE and CC delegation, so we had some engagement, but I have not that much to report. And secondly, because our dear colleague will be talking right after me, Hervé, and he will go into more detail of some of the points I'll be touching upon. The colleagues who went to, and I wasn't among them, to Seattle, they really liked the meeting and they really wanted to congratulate ICANN staff for organizing such a great meeting in this time of transition. As Jorge also mentioned, the new director, changes in the country, but they enjoyed the organization very much and also appreciated that the meeting was located in a hotel. There's enough meeting rooms for everyone, so it's always made participation and engagement more comfortable. That was a meeting where, like, talking from the numbers point of view, that Rome met and discussed their items, and one of them was, of course, ICP2, and I will go into more details about ICP2 policy. Recently, before the meeting in Seattle, all RARs did public consultations, and we concluded one in our region, also published the report about that. It's very comprehensive and explains the whole input from the community. Also, SOEC met the ICANN board to discuss on items. And also speaking about the board, as SOEC appoints 2 seats to the board, 9 in the 10th, and 1, the 9th board seat, which is now held by Christian Kaufmann, ended its term in October this year. And so soon the SOEC will look into the procedure to start the new round of elections for that seat. So that's it from me. Thanks, everyone. I'll be listening to all your inputs. There's a lot of interest. As this time I wasn't at the meeting, so this also serves for me, like I gave a summary from my team, but also I can also bring something back from you all. Thanks a lot.
And then Hervé, go ahead, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Sebastian. Thank you, Elena. It's an honor, but it's challenging to speak just after you. And so you precise in an excellent way a lot of things. Of course, for the SOEC, it was not all the SOEC who met in Seattle, because all the council met before during the APNIC meeting in Kuala Lumpur. The idea to meet in Kuala Lumpur during the APNIC 59 meeting and in February was to analyze the result from the regional questionnaire you spoke about, Elena, and the ICANN consultation about ICP2. So I recall that ICP2 was a document adopted in 2001, describing the criteria to recognize the regional internet registry. So the idea of our work for the SOEC is to update this criteria, defined between 20 and 25 years ago, and to use this criteria to, I would say, audit the course of a regional internet registry. And if in an extreme case, no solution is found, to de-recognize a regional internet registry. In Kuala Lumpur, we analyzed all the answers, and some of you from the ICANN community answered to the first consultation, and thank you for that. And it will be possible to write a new policy draft taking into account the answers. In Seattle, the vice chair of the SOEC and me were present, so Nick, again, Esteban, and me, Hervé. And we were able to present this new draft to the NROEC, so the group of the directors and CEOs of the regional internet registries. The draft was positively welcomed, and it was then decided to publish in this draft early April, so it will be soon. So normally in 1 week or 2 weeks, you will be able to read this new draft. And it was decided also to launch a new ICANN consultation on the new regional questionnaire from the 18th of April and during 2 months. So you will have the possibility to rework on this document. And so it will be a pleasure then to meet ourselves in Prague during ICANN 83, where the SOEC will work on the answers and the outputs on the new consultation and to draft another version. And hope we will be at a close point to the conclusion of such a document that could agree to with everybody. And as you said, Elena, also, we had the opportunity to meet the ICANN board of directors and to present Hans-Peter presented some elements about our work, about the regions, and we were able to answer the question from the directors. And from that, I think I was pretty complete. And I will have the pleasure, I think, to give the floor to Olivier.
Yeah, thank you very much, Hervé. Olivier Crépin-Leblanc speaking. And I'm not used to be at that position. Usually I sum up a few points which were not made by my colleagues. But I'll focus on a few things which came out to me in the week that I remember from the week. The at-large community as meets from the Saturday all the way to the Thursday, like we all do. We have a very long week. The first day was really spent looking at the three main targets of what at-large does: the policy and operations, the engagement with the new at-large community engagement subcommittee, the ACES, and thirdly, the improvements and the organizational matters, where we had a session discussing the continuous improvement program criteria. And I guess others might actually chime in on this as well. On the Sunday, one thing that came out was, one session that stood out was the joint ALAC and NCSG meeting. We hadn't had one of these for quite some time, so it was good for two communities to interact with each other and be able to work through some of the topics for discussion that we've had, including, of course, the next round and the applicant support program. We also had meetings with the SSAC on the usual topics of the SAFER, the Preventing Phishing, Safer Internet campaign, informal report, various keystone topics that were discussed at the time. We also, on the Sunday, had Naralo that did a roundtable on DNS abuse and AI, which was an interesting angle, artificial intelligence for or against DNS abuse. Very interesting in that sense. On the Monday, of course, the ICANN board met with the ALAC, and we had the evergreen issues, as we know, the pilot holistic review being one of them, the continuous improvement program. All of those organizational issues on this occasion were discussed. And we also had later on an open house for, I guess, a lot of newcomers that were in our community and that came to the meeting in Seattle with a fresh mind. On the Wednesday, one of the plenaries, the other plenary that caught my attention was one that was led by Avery, looking at the applicant guidebook, the latest revisions of the applicant guidebook. And we had an interesting angle, and we had one person who spoke for a topic, the other person against. So you had the pro and the no. The first one was about DNS abuse and the new GTLD round. Has ICANN done enough? So there was the one person who said, oh, absolutely. And the other one that went, oh, God, absolutely not. And we also had one about the applicant support program in regards to the new GTLD round. And again, we had the pros and the cons on that. And I would really suggest you have a watch over that recording, because it was quite interesting what came out of it. There was also, immediately following that, an Afri-ICANN session. And this is one of the things we often speak about with regards to applicant support. The Afri-ICANN community is looking at promoting African digital identity in the next GTLD round, addressing challenges and leveraging support mechanisms. So it's not just about applicant support, but it's about a lot more, including the notion of having African identity in there. I think that's all I'll touch on, because I'm sure there's others who are going to fill in some other parts, but altogether a very busy week indeed.
Thank you, Olivier. Sébastien Bachelet speaking. And now, Irina, please.
Thank you, Sebastian. Hope you can hear me well. And this is Irina Danelia speaking, coming from the country code part of the ICANN community. And I want to mention just a couple of sessions during that event. First of all, I'm a vice chair of CCNSO Strategic and Operating Planning Committee, which is tasked to deal on behalf of the country code managers with issues related to ICANN strategic planning and operating planning. And one of the repeating points we constantly mention in our submissions is the need for clear progress indicators and metrics which would help to judge how well ICANN doing in performing its both operating and strategic plans. So on our Sunday meeting, working meeting of the committee, we were joined by representatives of ICANN Planning, and we were really happy to hear that they kicked off the work on the project called Progress Management and Reporting Framework, which is expected to build progress indicators for the strategic plan, which will help to measure how well ICANN is moving to reach the strategic objectives, and also progress indicators for the operating plan, which may result in a dashboard which will help community again to understand how well we are all doing in terms of fulfilling the plans. So though there is no concrete time frame announced, we still applaud this initiative and are looking forward very much to see the progress of this development. And the second session I want to mention is the meeting of CCNSO and GAC. And I just want to compliment my colleagues who did, in my view, a very good job experimenting with innovative format. In addition to their traditional plenary part, they also suggested the engagement session, which was interactive breakout groups exercise, aiming to demonstrate different CCNSO models and to give opportunity to GAC members to engage with the representatives of CCTLD, who are very different in their size, in their governance models, in the way they use the technical backend operates, etc., etc. And with that, I think my 3 minutes are over. So I give the floor to Philippe Fourcade, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you, Irina. This is Philippe Fourcade here from the ISPCP. I selected 3 topics that sort of stood out for me during that ICANN 82 meeting. The first of which is the status of ICANN reviews, just picking up on what Martin said earlier. The second is the session that we had between the CSB commercial stakeholder group and the contracted party house on DNS reviews. And the third one is following up from what Hervé just said, the exchange on ICP2. On the first topic, with the board, we being the ISPCP, and I believe that was the same question for everyone. As a side note, it would be useful to have a community discussion moving forward on things like this, on the impasse that we've reached in terms of the backlog of reviews, the ATRT3 recommendations that have not been implemented. Number 4, which is in the making, the continuous improvement program, the pilot holistic review, all of this piling up, and the concerns over how we could factor in, avoid overlaps, and optimize resources moving forward. I think what's reassuring is that there's sort of a way forward, or global recognition, I would say, of the problem. The co-chairs, after the ICANN 82 meeting, wrote to the board and proposed a way, the co-chairs of the PHR proposed a way forward in terms of factoring in the continuous improvement program and the structural review. Obviously, there are questions in terms of how we can align those two things, as well as the mandated reviews mandated by the bylaws. So it's certainly a challenge there, but there's hope, I would say. On the second topic, we had a really interesting session with the contracted party house on DNS abuse reports. We came back to actual scenarios, actual reports of DNS abuse, and trying to understand why those didn't get through or weren't treated the way we thought they would be. So the first exchange of information, and certainly a follow-up would be warranted, just to determine whether that advice was useful. Anecdotally, the scenario I put forward, a week later, the website was suspended. I won't complain personally, but we need to have a follow-up on this. And the third and final session, or topic, I would say, is ICP2, the Internet Coordination Policy number 2, and the recognition of of regional internet registries. We had interesting exchanges, not only with the board, but also within the community on the sort of scenarios that should be tested, that this policy should be tested against, whether friendly or hostile or anything else for that matter. And I think a number of us within the community are looking forward to the updates that I understand will be coming in a couple of weeks from now. And I think that obviously this is a crucial matter for the community. So these were the three subject topics that I found outstanding for ICANN 82. With this, next in the line is Emilia, I think.
Hi, thank you very much. Unfortunately, I won't be able to show myself to you because one of the outcomes of ICANN, quite unexpected one for me, was the broken laptop screen. So I have some technical difficulties in joining. However, still I would be very happy to share my insight with you, and there was indeed a lot of highly engaging discussions during the past ICANN. One that was already mentioned a couple of times by my previous speakers is the topic of DNS abuse. As Jorge mentioned, it's indeed an evergreen topic, and also it is quite across community. I have some technical difficulties in joining. However, still I would be very happy to share insight with you. And there was indeed a lot of highly engaging discussions during the past ICANN. One that was already mentioned a couple of times by previous speakers is the topic of DNS abuse. As Jorge mentioned, it's indeed an evergreen topic, and also it is quite a cross-community issue. And I think during the ICANN 82 in Seattle, we had several very interesting discussions on it. Also, thanks to informal report, I think it created a good base to actually name some challenges and to formulate some conclusions on this, and also what could be the next steps when it comes also for the at-large as such, or for the whole ICANN community. So I'm really looking forward to the next weeks and also the next ICANN on in regards how this discussion will evolve and what will be the outcomes of it. Also, what was very interesting for me is how this topic was combined with AI. We had discussion on that during the at-large ESSAC cross meeting. It was especially interesting to listen about different approaches to how AI can make it easier for malicious actors to different kind of attacks. One of such cases is, for example, phishing, which is so much easier with the use of AI, especially the spear phishing, targeting the high personas in companies or in creating so-called deepfakes. So I think it is also a very interesting angle to take into consideration. Also, Neralo organized a roundtable on this topic and had a great lineup of speakers, which also, I think, contributed a lot to this discussion. For me, it was interesting because I think AI and ICANN scope of topics is not so easily cross-connected. However, they are also not separate. And DNS abuse topic is a good example in this regard. And especially considering how quickly the technology is evolving, I think it is definitely important to give a closer look to this and how those trends evolve, and also how they influence phenomena such as just DNS abuse, but also other fields. These topics were definitely of high interest for me. One last thing that I would like to mention is that also during this ICANN meeting, we as at-large continued the discussion on ACES, at-large community engagement team, which I think is highly important work, because in this new structure, we would like to focus on increasing the outreach we have or reach out to new communities, new groups for which our work of ICANN may be complicated to understand. So we would like to improve the ways of communication and raising awareness among such groups. So we had the session on that, and we are continuing this work also after the ICANN meeting. Today was another meeting of this group. So I think this may be an interesting for all of you to follow up on, because I think capacity building is crucial for every community, for every structure in ICANN. We hope that this work will be continued, and I really hope that soon there will be some new updates to share on this, how it worked out, and some practical action points on that. Thank you so much. And I think the next person after me is Emmanuel, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you, Eralo and Sebastian, for the opportunity. So I will not be turning my video today, but I'll give the full update nonetheless. From the non-commercial stakeholder group, we had a fruitful meeting, both NCUC and NPOC. I represent NPOC as a policy chair. Let me take you through some key highlights that we actually picked from our participation. On the strengthening the multi-stakeholder model, we noted growing concern about national legislation bypassing ICANN processes. We call for better documentation of ICANN legitimacy and its success to help build an engagement with government. On the structure of ICANN meetings, we had a meeting, the board proposed reducing the number of annual meetings. While we understand the need for efficiency, we strongly oppose any reform that may limit participation, especially proposal around participation fees, etc. And on the DNS abuse and human rights, we continue our collaboration with the contracted party house to develop non-binding DNS abuse mitigation guidelines. The NCSG advocates strongly for integrating human rights impact assessment into abuse response processes. On the transfer policy review, policy development process, the final report was adopted. And while we supported it, we raised concerns about the absence of mandatory two-factor authentication and other key account security measures. We also pushed for including the human rights impact assessment with the policy recommendations. On the applicant support program, we actually had a meeting with ALAC. We advocate for a greater financial assistance, clearer legal and technical guidance, and meaningful outreach to underserved communities. We also question whether the 35% auction discount is truly effective. So this was also discussed during our issue forum. We also had a joint session with the board. We emphasized on the importance of inclusivity, transparency, and fair representation, especially for stakeholders from the Global South. In our exchange with the GAC, we reiterate the need to align GAC advice with the GNSO policy processes and call for mutual respect towards the PDP outcomes. We also invite the GAC support in promoting human rights assessment and responsible DNS governance. On continuous improvement, we welcome the establishment of the new GNSO Standing Committee on Continuous Improvement, and we hope that this key step will keep our process transparent and adaptive. On the DNS abuse community updates, so NetBacon and the contracted party house presented new templates and guidance to help streamline abuse reporting and make more actionable for registrar. On participation and equity, civil society voices that we represent once again call for language accessibility, financial support, and continuation of hybrid participation model, all essential for meaningful engagement. And the last one, not the least, is the Latin script diacritics. It's a new established working group. We held our first meeting during Seattle meeting, and the group aimed to address the script harmonization issues related to diacritic marks. So NPOC will be participating in the upcoming meetings together with NCUC on the working group to support inclusivity and linguistic diversity. So those were the points I actually noted from side. I will let my colleague from the NCSG when time comes to speak more about some of the topics that I may miss. So I will now give the floor to Natalie. Thank you.
Thank you, Emmanuel. This is Nati. I would like to share with you something that first came to my mind as a key takeaway as I was thinking about it, because it was like a red thread that followed me throughout the week. During the meeting in Seattle, across various levels, from working groups to informal conversations, I constantly heard themes of improvement, continuous improvement, transparency, and efficiency. However, what struck me is that while these goals are widely shared between all of us, we all tend to face a recurring obstacle. How can we assess whether something is improving or not enough if we don't have clear standards, benchmarks, or clean metrics in place? Taking this to my at-large level, for example, if we are implementing some steps that are aimed at increasing, for instance, the ALS engagement, my question and our questions may be, is it working well? What is being done? And more importantly, how do we all know if it's effective? And if it's not, how can we adapt this? Because we all often work in our voluntary capacities. We are doing our best. And to stay motivated, this is something we should really take into account. And based on this, my key takeaway, and thus also a current aim of mine, is the importance of making our processes, let's say, more metrics driven. As an outcome of this meeting, especially now when the roles of internet governance and internet governance bodies are being revised or even questioned, whether through WSIS Plus 20, the IGF mandate, and others, and the broader global conversations, I believe it's essential that we as a community have a clear direction and processes, and to stay motivated and be proud of what we can all build together to ensure that our efforts are truly contributing and strengthening ICANN's mission and impact in these days. It would be my personal outcome. Thank you so much. And I apologize because I don't see it in front of me. So whoever is the kind person,
I will do it, Nati.
going next.
Thank you very much for your intervention, Nati. Great international speaking. And I give the floor to Nick from the UKCCTLD.
Merci.
Thank you, Sebastian, and welcome everybody, and nice to see everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to speak again. I think other people have already stated how great the Seattle meeting was, so I completely agree with that. From the CCNSO's perspective, I just wanted to talk about the three things that we usually cover, and thank you to Irina for covering some of the work on the ICANN finance and strategy work, which is a very important part of what we do in terms of scrutiny. We cover three things. We cover policy, we cover some sort of best practice sharing and information sharing and capacity, and we also have some internal administration of the CCNS. In terms of the policy, we have had a number of meetings now with Kim Davies and the IANA team around the policy gaps in relation to the root zone administration and the CCTLDs within the root zone. This was prompted initially by the .lb situation, the Lebanese CCTLD, which was sort of orphaned, if I can call it that way. The manager gave it back to ICANN and didn't want to manage it. So there was a caretaker role for the IANA staff, which has not happened before. There was no policy to this, so it was made up on the spur of the moment to ensure continuity of operations. So we've been talking to the IANA staff about that. There's an ongoing process of policy gap analysis, and we have settled on a couple of priority items together with the IANA. Firstly, in relation to the quality of the contact information that IANA has, because IANA doesn't have, it turns out, up-to-date information for contacting all of the CCNSO member or even the CCTLD members who are in the IANA database, and that is a big problem for them in terms of ensuring that the CCTLD can be reached in cases of emergency. And from the CCTLD's perspective, disaster recovery was an area that we'd like to explore a bit more with the IANA staff. And this is all about the fundamental purposes why we're here, the stability and security of the infrastructure for the communities that we serve. So that was a very interesting session. In terms of best practice, what I cover personally is the DNS abuse area. I'm chair of the CCNSO's DNS Abuse Standing Committee, and we held a plenary session within the CCNSO around the topic of registration data, collection, purposes of collection, accuracy and maintenance, and the intersection with DNS abuse in terms of prevention or mitigation. We had presentations from the Swedish and the New Zealand registries about how they collect and verify data, and then some insights from a GTLD registrar and from law enforcement about the topic. It's a very interesting session, actually. And it's not a surprise to people that CCTLDs are quite particularly where they have a nexus requirement, that you need to know your registrant in order to ensure that they meet the nexus requirement for the CCTLD. But what was interesting was that people after the presentations had a more nuanced understanding of the registration data and abuse, in the sense that it was still an important factor, but they realized there's a lot of other factors involved in DNS abuse, not just the accuracy of the registration data. So following the presentations, the importance of the registration data to prevent DNS abuse actually reduced. And I think a lot of CCTLDs are very large and well established, and actually a lot of our abuse is nothing to do with malicious registrations, it's to do with compromised websites. So it's an interesting topic. And I'll just wrap up finally by saying my time on the CCNSO Council came to an end, others continue, and we had fresh elections for the chair and vice chairs of the CCNSO. The chair continues to be Alejandra Reynoso, who is probably known to most of you, and with Jordan Carter from Australia, and BE from .ng Nigeria continuing as vice chair. So I'll wrap up there. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Nick. And contrary to the photos, Matthias just informed me that he's sick. Therefore, let's go to Natalia, please.
Thank you very much, Sebastian, and so pity about Matthias. I would divide my short speech for 3 parts, and the first one will be about a big compliment to our community. As you remember, I think so, a few years ago, community and outsiders said that we are a little bit slow with our work and we are not responding quickly to technological challenges and what's happening around. And now I want to make, again, compliments to us. The raised topics and discussion are timely, and we are answering the current challenges and questions, and maybe we move forward fastly than this question rising up. And if we look at the schedule of ICANN meeting and topics of session cross meetings, we will see that we are doing our job very great, because we are keeping the topics about not only new round of GTLD. We're talking about DNS abuse and AI, integration of Web3 domains, and how this DNS ecosystem will work with them. We're talking about the essence of what's happening in internet governance and in legislation field depends on external waves of geopolitics and politics situation, etc. We are caring about now implementation, as my colleagues already told, of CIP results and not duplicate processes of review. So well done. We may look how we improved ourselves. The second part of my speech will dedicate to our mission. I think it's very logical one step in my short speech, because when we are talking about what we need to do, we need to remind ourselves that, for example, at-large community is about end users' interest. And probably, maybe, I don't know, I would love to see at-large community a little bit louder and not silent inside of topics like closure of some domains, for example, .su question, or exclusion from the client list of custom companies from this country on this country, despite the fact some domains might be sponsored and a new owner of the domain may decide these topics and this part of clients may be outside of this service. Or we may talk about how comfortable applicants from different countries may feel during the next round of GTLD. I'm talking now about countries under sanction, and we know that is a set of countries. And I think it's our work. It's what about we should care like at large community and not implement only our general statements and not general statements related internet governance at all, because it is a point inside of ICANN framework. It's a point for work for us. And I think we should care about full purpose of the community fulfilled. And the third part of my speech is about how we meet. Adam Peak already told about this group of discussion and this new wave of discussion inside of ICANN communities. Maybe it will be potential changes and meeting schedules, and maybe we will have one fully online meeting during the year, and maybe we will be, how can I say, more restricted in set of countries we will choose for our future meeting, because we know that our community worry about the special culture of each host country, restriction of entry and staying there, some visas issue we already discussing. It's very interesting with which results this working group will come to Prague meeting, because it relates all of us. I attended last ICANN meeting online, and we understand that for each meeting, some part of the community having troubles, because for me, it was mostly during the late evening and night, and I didn't attend and missed a lot of sessions and a lot of discussion. And thank you so much again to ICANN.org for all tools we have for having recordings and being online so comfortable. Thanks so much for these readout speakers, because I know now a lot because I'm still listening recordings, and great we have different readouts inside of our community and very nice speakers. I hope we will be in almost equal situation online and offline when we are attending. So thanks so much for this discussion today. I am giving the floor to you, Pierre Banis.
Thank you very much, Natalia. I hope everyone is hearing me. So thank you, Sebastian. Thank you, everyone, for organizing this readout. I will share with you my quick takeaway of this ICANN meeting in Seattle, not going back to what Nick shared excellently about most of the CCNSO session. Just 3 or 4 points. Of course, the first point is that the organization was brilliant. That was a well-organized ICANN meeting. It's always important to remind us all that the logistics are at the basics of everything. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but it worked. I would say also that there was a good blend in the agenda between time where we have to work inside our own community, our own constituency, and tracks of general interest. If you are from an organization like AFNIC, where you have several colleagues that are able to come at the same time, there is plenty of good experience for everyone, whether it is a techie or legal or marketing or everything. So it was a nice blend. I want to share very important information also with those of you who are not part of the CCNSO. It's that we had a very nice cocktail of the CCNSO as usual, which is something everyone should be jealous of, and we cherish this moment, of course. We had a nice session. I'm not very sure that Nick talked about it, or maybe I missed it. But we had a nice session in the CCNSO about the contribution of the CCs to the financial contribution of the CCs to ICANN. And that was pretty interesting to see all these figures. I think this is an important work to recognize that they can be non-contracted parties in ICANN still really supporting the ICANN approach and supporting it with money. So this is something that no one know, some people don't know, a lot of CCs are contributing financially to ICANN also on a voluntary basis, and this discussion was pretty interesting. I want to mention also something I think I've never seen before during the GAC CCNSO session. Usually, I'm sorry to say that, but most of these GNSO or even, GNSO are very formal. You have the two chairs who have negotiated the agenda, and this is not the most rock and roll part of ICANN. At this GAC CCNSO session, there was a speed dating between CC managers and GAC members to better understand the two words with white papers, and it was very concrete, and I really loved it. I think we should build on this interaction, human interaction, a little bit more when we do sessions between communities. And I will finish, I'm very sorry I was a little bit long, but I will just finish to mention a session that we had within the CCNSO also, an interaction with 3 board members that have strong links with the CCTLDs, of course, Patricio Poblete and Baron Holland, but also Burr, who has been appointed by the GNSO, but has a long history with the CCs too. And this session was interesting because it was an occasion to talk about what people didn't really talk publicly during the Seattle meeting, which was, what about the new American administration? What do you think? What are the fears? And that was a very frank discussion with the positions of everyone in the room. And I would say a part where Becky Burr, with her long experience being here in ICANN from the very beginning, gave a statement of love to this organization. That was almost something, a kind of testimony of the work on One Life. And that was very impressive. And it gave me at least, and I will finish with that, the idea that there are a lot of people within the ICANN community that dedicated almost all of our career for this organization to work. And in the midst of uncertainty that we are living in, these people, and there are a number of these people in this room tonight, are the pillars that we must work on to make sure that we remain independent and we remain in a position where we can take decisions without order for that or that government. And I think that was a very strong message that she shared. And thank you very much. And with that, I will give the floor to Sébastien Ducos.
Hello, everybody. Good evening. So I wanted to talk a bit from a point of view of the registry stakeholder groups. I often drift a bit in different caps there, but tonight we'll focus about them. And I wanted to focus also about the new work that is being launched within the GNSO that very much connects with what we do. Jorge spoke about it on top of the hour with regards to the work on accuracy, to the work on DNS abuse, and etc. And I just wanted to relay the fact that the CPH in general, that the registries in particular, haven't stopped working on those topics for the last few years, that indeed the DNS abuse small team within the GNSO had a pause whilst we were finishing the amendments that we've talked about many times over the last 2 years and looking at the results. But in the meantime, the CPH own DNS abuse group went in a series of interviews with different parts of the community to gauge people's positions and points of view on this in order to get a better understanding of where things are going. I wanted to salute also, it's not directly the CPH or the registries, but attached to it, all the work that's been done by the NetBeacon Institute that is very present. The work that we've done also in collaboration, for example, with the NCSG and all the work they put together to help us work through human rights impact assessment in dealing with DNS abuse and all those problems. Eye-opening work for a lot of us. And then all this, obviously, the GNSO has announced that the intent to regather the small team on DNS abuse. The call for interest has been issued. The team is pretty much up and ready, and we will start very soon. On accuracy, also work that we will participate in, but again, the GNSO is reconvening work there. We haven't quite started, but it will start soon, and the registries are very keen to participate. I heard somebody mentioning Latin script. Maybe Emmanuel, it was you. The work on 6 in Latin scripts, that's obviously something also we're participating in as it affects the RTLDs, and with strong interest, particularly from me, as I was early on somebody that, or at least 2 or 3 years ago, maybe not early on, I think Equibic was beat me by about 10 years on it, but interested in this work. I wanted to also remind everybody that there's work ongoing in topics like the PPSNI that is being revived or shelved constantly back and forth. I think everybody agrees that work needs to be done there. I don't know that everybody agrees on where we're at with it and if we need to restart from scratch or pick up from where it was left. I see comments there in the chat. I didn't say it. And RDRS, which I happily lead, but it was also something that the CPH is very active in, which should have a final report, at least on the pilot, in the next 2 months ahead of ICANN 83 in Prague. But also SubPro, for those that have been playing the game, you would have received in the last 2 days a flurry of new meetings now that we're hitting the last run, picking up public comments and et cetera. So I think I'll leave it there, and I'll leave it to my good friend Bruna, who is following.
Thank you, Seb, and hi everyone. Thanks a lot for the invitation as well. I'll try not to be too repetitive with some of the inputs brought by Emmanuel, but as he highlighted, NCSG had a super productive meeting as well, with meetings with the board, meetings with the NCPH, the CPH as well, and we also organized a couple of membership meetings, but also an issues forum on behalf of NCSG. From this work, I'll perhaps start by the issues forum, because I think it's one of these new initiatives led by first NCUC and then NCSG to try to provide some sort of a deep dive into some policy aspects and discussions for the broader membership. So we have been seeing this as a really good and relevant kind of effort in order to bring everyone up to the same kind of stage when engaging with those topics. The second point I would highlight is the Human Rights Impact Assessment session. As many highlighted here, we hosted, together with other parts of the community, a session with the goal of developing human rights impact assessment guidelines for DNS abuse mitigation. This is a work that's being led by Farzani and Michaela, so it was part and has been part of a lot of the efforts NCSG has been doing more recently, and I'll just take the opportunity to also thank the community for all of the engagements in these aspects and these discussions. And then also going to the board meeting, we took also the opportunity to highlighting and asking some further questions about many topics, but from that I will maybe touch upon the WSIS +20 engagement and some of the goals that we want to hear from ICANN.org and some of the next steps in terms of making sure that governments, member states, they do understand what's at stake at ICANN and they do value and cherish the multi-stakeholder model as it's supposed to be, as a collaborative and a hands-on exercise for everyone. It's by no means trying to compete with multilateral or spaces or government missions and so on. Last but not least, I'll just highlight some of the council work. NCSG has been engaging on some discussions there, and the first that I would bring up is the transfer policy debate. So the transfer policy was approved by council, and we asked the broader group to work with the chair of the working group and also make sure that we added a human rights checklist to these efforts, which will be the first attempt of making sure that PDP or an outcome similar to a PDP will look forward to not just filling in the gaps and trying to address the gaps in human rights impact assessment, but also making sure that this is part of the discussion for future efforts. And also the RDRS Stand Committee, we'll go through the recommendations to evaluate accountability and transparency of the system, but also to try to uphold privacy and rights of registrants within this discussion. And I guess it's safe to say that NCSG will also be engaging in other debates, such as the small group on DNS abuse that the council has just approved the idea of coming back, and the whole goal for us as well there is to continue the work that has been performed by Michaela and Farzaneh and ground future and upcoming discussions on DNS abuse on human rights impacts assessment, and also promote safeguards for due process, transparency, and proportionality in DNS abuse mitigation discussions. I think that's a little bit of what we discussed. Also important to say we engaged with ALAC, as many mentioned, with the GAC, and this was a very, let's say, exhausting meeting for us all, but we're ready and looking forward to Prague and really open for any further discussions you community members want to do with NCSG in any of the topics that I brought up. So I'll stop here and I'll pass the floor to Roberto.
Hi, thank you, Bruna. I have attended the meeting as a mentor for NextGen, so I have spent all my time with the mentors. What the NextGen? What the NextGen do is basically three things. First, they have meetings with the different constituency stakeholder groups, advisory committees, and so on. Then they do some presentations on a topic of their choice within the ICANN remit that they have agreed with the mentor. And then as a third and last part, they optionally attend the sessions that are of their particular interest in order to deepen their knowledge on different topics. The first part, as I said, was to meet all the different groups. And that was particularly interesting for me because also to notice how different stakeholder groups and constituencies introduce themselves and present themselves vis-à-vis the newcomer. I think that if I have a general comment, I think that we should pay very much attention to the fact that NextGen are people that are at their first experience in an ICANN meeting. They don't have a clue of what is the complicated organization of ICANN and the different interactions, except for what they have done in terms of the learning in the ICANN Learn material. But that's their first practical experience. So it's not a good idea to flood them with acronyms and things. It also was interesting to see how the NextGen had sometimes very interesting questions to the different groups. That means that they were really engaging themselves and really willing to learn more. About the presentations, who was at the meeting heard me at the public forum. I was complaining by the fact that very few people from the community were attending the presentations. It's a pity because there were some very interesting things with fresh material and fresh ideas. And I think those presentations are available, are recorded, and I invite all those who have not attended to at least look at the presentations. And then there followed some specific sessions that were in their interest. I noticed that there was a lot of interest generally in security, DNS security, DNS abuse, and some general internet governance matters that are borderline between ICANN and IGF. After my speech at the public forum, we had the wrap-up with the NextGen, and I was very happy to see 8 board members at that wrap-up meetings. That means that for me the message went through, and I think that the community is understanding the importance of the NextGen that is basically our future. Thank you. I think that after me, it's a fellow that will speak about the fellow. Yashim or...
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Yasser Zonar for the record. I'm the individual member of EURELO and the second time ICANN Fellow. My first ICANN Fellowship was ICANN 79 in Puerto Rico, and I'm grateful to be continued that journey at ICANN 82 in Seattle. The second experience gave me a much deeper perspective with the foundation during ICANN 79. I was better prepared to engage, ask meaningful questions, and contribute more actively. It was a great experience to see how multi-stakeholder groups work together in real time to make decisions about technical issues, policies, and the community. As a EURALO member, I participated at large sessions and emphasized the role of end users in shaping internet policies. The discussion around digital rights, cybersecurity, and public interest policies help the importance of inclusive voices and cross-community collaborations. And I learned about how the internet works in the ICANN sessions. I learned about what is WSIS plus 20 is. I learned about how the new GTLD process is working on. And it was a wonderful experience to learn all these things and try to understand how this is going to be work in the real time. I special thank to EURALO team and the Cyranos for guiding and supporting throughout this journey. I encourage other team members, youth, and newcomers to take the opportunity and get involved. The future of the internet depends on diverse, informed, and engaged voices, and programs like ICANN Fellowship are the excellent opportunity to learn, connect, and contribute meaningfully. I am engaged and actively involved in ICANN, and EURALO will remain an important focus for me to move ahead. And I will be connecting to be a next ICANN in Czech Republic. I will be there to understand more internet and more ICANN as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yassir. It's a pleasure to have you here during this readout. And next time, after the meeting in Prague, we will not have a fellow, but a next-gen, as a next-gener will be coming from Europe, and that will be a good match for the next readout. I don't know if Chris Buckridge is able to speak.
That's good. My apologies. I'm on a train back to Brussels afternoon today. But thank you for putting on this invitation to be part of it. It's obviously hard being the last speaker to come up with something new to say, but on the positive side, it's nice to have been reminded of just how much goes on at an ICANN meeting and how much went on. Sense of transition. I really just wanted to highlight, I think, some of the discussions around the holistic review, the continuous improvement, the ATRT 3 and 4 were really important to have. And I think it was really good to see those progressing, not to a sort of solid conclusion yet. I think there are still more discussions to have, but I think we did some really good work in starting to draw out the different perspectives. On another point, I think the discussions around how we meet are really important, and it was great to hear the input from the community on that. There are clearly some very strong feelings. There's clearly a lot to unpack and consider in all of the different options before us, but I think that was a really good, an opportunity really well used there. And finally, just to echo Roberto, I think how we integrate the next gen and the fellows and the newcomers to the meeting into the community and into the meeting program is really an important discussion to have. And I think we had some really good discussions about it in Seattle, and hopefully that will build into something there. Thank you very much again, and apologies for the bad connection.
Thank you, Chris. It's always a pleasure to have you in our readout, and I hope that next time you will not be in a train, but able to participate more with us. But thank you. Now we end up this round around the clock speeches, and I would like really to thank everyone of you who participate, or all the participants that give a good overview of what's happened during the ICANN 82. I am sure that there are other things that could be discussed, but that's already a good view of all that. Next time, we suggest to meet for the next readout after ICANN 83 in Prague, the 1st of July 2025, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. UTC. Please save the date for that. And there are plenty of meetings going on where we will be talking about, not just in Prague, but I guess at the Global AGF and some other meetings will go on with us or without us, ITU, I guess. Thank you very much once again all for your participation. I hope that it was a good opportunity to exchange about ICANN 82 and take care of yourself. We need all of you and talk to you soon online or in meeting you in some place around this world. Once again, thank you. Have a good evening, good day for the people from the other side of the world. Thank you for coming to this readout. Bye-bye all.